The Provo Municipal Council to order. Today is Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. The time is 5:30 p.m. This meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting with some in-person components as well as continued virtual meeting access. The meeting will be available to the public for live broadcast and on-demand viewing on YouTube at youtube.com/Provo City Council and on Facebook at facebook.com/Provo Council. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices and being respectful to others. And please wait to speak until called on by the council chair. In the current situation where the meeting is being held via Zoom webinar and broadcast over YouTube, I remind you to turn off your mics when not speaking so as to minimize the potential for background noises and conversations to be picked up, recorded, and broadcast for all to hear. We still got the feed going? Okay. We'd now like to state the names of those present. Let's see if we have all counselors here. I'm just looking through my screen here. Looks like we do. And we have Mayor Kafusi here with us as well as members of our administrative and council staff. The opening prayer for tonight's meeting will be offered by Mr. Harding.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity we have to gather as city leaders and to discuss the affairs of the city and to make these decisions on behalf of the residents who elected us. We ask thee for guidance and inspiration to discern the most important aspects of the issues that we will decide today, and we'll know how to properly weigh the various arguments and points. We ask for a blessing upon all of the residents of this fine city, and particularly upon those who are employed by the city to provide the services that the city provides. We ask thee to help us to be aware and considerate of the feelings, the needs, and the desires of those we serve. And we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Will now be provided by Mr. Handley.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Handley.
There are three types of items for which
before we move into public comment, we did have a statement that we would like Mr. Handley to read for us.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. This is a statement to help clarify, if I could say so, to motivate people to come back to our meetings, so you know what our commitment to safety is. And the declining rates of coronavirus infection continue to be very encouraging for Utah. We feel grateful for the commitment of so many for so long to maintain proper health protocols of masks and social distancing, and for the marvelous, even miraculous work that has led to the vaccines. We wish to take this opportunity to encourage everyone eligible to get their vaccine as soon as possible and to thank the many professionals and volunteers who are working hard every day to deliver the vaccines to the public. This progress is what is allowing us now to be gathering again in person for our council meetings, a day we have longed for as a council. While we have missed in-person association, we have appreciated the considerable work of our staff to make our online experience possible and the patience of the public during this time. We are grateful that during this time, we have continued to get valued feedback from citizens online and by email. We will continue to rely on our staff and on your patience as we transition to a hybrid model of our meetings so as to facilitate the needs of several of our council members and many in the public who are still not vaccinated and who do not wish to risk coming to our meetings in person. As good as things seem at present, we do note that we are not quite out of the woods. We have not yet crossed the threshold where a majority of the population is vaccinated. And while we are encouraged that a majority of the most vulnerable have received vaccinations, in Utah County, we are only at 22% fully vaccinated overall. As we host this and future meetings, and in the interest of our continued full recovery as a thriving and bustling community, we encourage compliance with the recommendations of the CDC and other health organizations to continue to practice social distancing and to wear masks when indoors and unable to socially distance, especially where vaccinated and unvaccinated people from mixed households are gathered. We ask then that we all guard the safety of the remaining majority of our population who are not yet vaccinated and who remain potentially vulnerable by using the protocols as recommended. And for clarification, because the CDC guidelines do not include a recommendation for masks in groups of vaccinated people, and because everyone on the dais has been fully vaccinated, we will be socially distanced, but will not be using masks while on the dais. But we encourage everyone to join us in using them as we mingle together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. We are now ready to receive public comment, and staff will play a short video explaining how interested persons can comment.
Public comment will be received. The first is the open public comment period. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for public comments on matters that do not appear on tonight's agenda. The second is for items that require a public hearing. For these items, time will be provided for all those who wish to speak. The third is for items on the agenda that do not require a public hearing. The council will allow up to 15 minutes for comments on each item. Because the City Council is meeting virtually using Zoom webinar, and this meeting is being broadcast on the Provo City Council's YouTube channel, we have enabled telephone access to receive public comment, the numbers for which will be shown on screen during the meeting. When a caller is connected, they will be required to enter the meeting ID and enter the pound sign. When asked for a personal ID number, enter pound. The caller will now enter the meeting as an attendee and will be able to hear the meeting while muted. Similarly, we have enabled access for persons wanting to connect via computer to the Zoom meeting. As attendees, you can raise your hand electronically at the appropriate times to comment when called upon. For telephone callers, when you wish to speak on an item being discussed, press star 9 to raise your hand and then wait to be called upon. When called upon, press star 6 to unmute yourself. Attendees will be called upon by the last 4 digits of the listed phone number or by the name listed. Please provide your name and city of residence before making your comments. You will be given up to 2 minutes to speak. A timer will be posted on screen and a beep should be audible when your time is up. A reminder that there is a lag of approximately 30 to 60 seconds between the meeting and the broadcast. To avoid confusion, callers should mute the broadcast to hear the discussion in real time. The open public comment period starts now.
Do we have any members of the public that wish to comment? It doesn't appear that we have anyone waiting for the open mic period in the public comment period, so we will close public comment and move on to our first agenda item, which is approval of the March 30th, 2021 council meeting minutes. And if there are there, well, first I'll ask, are there any objections or requested changes? Seeing none, I will declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. We'll now move on to our first action agenda item, presentation regarding the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 tentative proposed budget. And I know those few pieces of paper represent a lot of work there. We're pleased to welcome Mayor Michelle Kafusi to present this.
Good evening, Chair Sewell and Vice Chair Shipley, and fellow council members. I am pleased to submit to you a balanced budget where revenues equal expenses. I would like to thank each long hours of hard work so the council and get a transparent view of each department's budget. I thought they were excellent presentations. We began working on the budget in January, projecting both department and city needs. The council's fiscal year 2022 budget priority statement was very helpful in this process and became a roadmap for our decision-making. I appreciated Councillor Harding's concerns when it came to increasing the bandwidth of our funding projects. Councillor Shipley's desire to have intent language that can be outcome-based, which will be an ongoing conversation. Councillor Handley suggested phasing of a plan over the next 2 to 3 years to meet the needs of our police department. And Councillor Ellsworth's recommendation to get support documents for our strategic parking management plan to capture the institutional knowledge when making significant progress. So thank you. My number one focus was to restore my employees back to a pre-COVID state and make them whole. The council was also in full support. I asked a lot from our employees last year, including budget cuts, hiring freezes, no sick leave buyout, and many other cuts and sacrifices, so we could be prepared to weather a pandemic. We are pleased to be able to reinstate the following: coverage of employees' health insurance cost increase, Utah retirement system, merit increases, career series advancements and market study increases, employee appreciation and recognition, birth parent and adoption leave, and sick leave buyout will be restored. These are just a few items in our budget that I am particularly interested in and wanted to highlight. None of this could happen without John Borgett, Director Administrative Services and his team, especially David and Kelsey. I welcome and encourage you as a council to carefully review our recommended budget. As always, I also welcome input from our Provo citizens. Respectfully, Mayor Michelle Kafusi. And I will now turn the time over to Director John Borgett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's a pleasure, Honorable Council, to give you kind of an overview of the budget that's being delivered to the council tonight. I would mention that we have posted the budget document as well as the budget highlights document that I'm going to be going through with you on our city website. It's posted on provo.org. And if you go into finance and then reports, you'll see the 2022 tentative budget, and it is there available as well as seeing the budget highlights. I want to just mention a couple of things about the budget before we go through the highlights. First of all, this year's budget, tentative budget, the amount is $303,014,959. There's a lot of things that are included in the budget, and I would mention to the public and also to the council that we're going to be spending a fair amount of time or significant amount of time with the council over the coming weeks going through this in more detail. But tonight, our intention is to just kind of give kind of a brief synopsis of some things that are included in the budget. I would also echo what Mayor Ficlucci mentioned, and that is to thank David Mortensen and Kelly Zarbach for all of the efforts and everything they've done to get us prepared for this day. I would also like to mention the directors and what an important role they play as we work with them and a number of the employees, a lot of the employees throughout the city. This budget is the result of many hours and the contributions of council members, public employees, and city leadership. In previous council work sessions over the last several months, each of the directors have come in and have had discussions with the council over their needs and things that they're addressing. And so a lot of effort has gone into it. Preparation for this budget began in January 2021 with the mayor, CAO, and administrative team looking at early revenue forecasts, projected retirement, and insurance increases and department needs for the fiscal year 2022. Scrolling down a little further, Provo continues to work hard in maximizing every dollar and providing a great value to residents. Our employees understand that every tax dollar we receive is a sacrifice for our residents who trust us to use it wisely. The 2022 budget supports our ongoing goal of continued fiscal health and sustainable budget. Monies are invested in capital improvements, vehicle replacement, and employees. Provo City employees are among the greatest and most critical assets the city has, and by investing in them, we are better able to recruit, develop, and retain top talent, top employees, as the mayor mentioned in her introduction. I would also mention that the administration has reviewed and addressed the budget priorities that were provided by the municipal council in this 2022 tentative budget. Scrolling on the next page, there are some utility rate increases that are proposed as part of this recommended budget. An average 10% or $6.80 monthly increase per average residential home on waste utility sales is recommended. Also, an average 5% or $2.37 monthly increase per average residential home on water utility sales. And both these increases go along with a long-term plan that was presented by Public Works several years ago, and they're just following that specific plan. If you scroll down a little bit further, you can see a chart. This just kind of shows if you combine all of the utilities the city has. In yellow is representative of Provo, and you can see where we fall amongst other cities of comparable size and also in our local community. And I would just mention that we are roughly fifth on this chart, but one of the reasons that we're in the upper tier is because of basically the city administration and directors focusing on needed infrastructure to make sure that we are prepared for the long term and provide the best benefit for the residents of Provo. Listed below are the funded personnel costs. The mayor already touched on those, so I'm not going to repeat those, but it's very significant and very important. I think it's significant that both administration and the council in their budget priorities recognizes the significant need for attracting, attaining, and taking care of and providing good benefits so that we can have employees that can drive the city into the future. Scroll down to the next page, you can see that this kind of talks specifically about what's included in the budget, specifically regarding things that were cut in the pandemic last year. And I'm just going to kind of go through and talk about the yeses briefly. The sick leave buyout, as the mayor mentioned, has been included. And then also, I would mention that I just found out that I'm going to move my screen a little bit so you can see my face a little better. I apologize for this. Just 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to move this over so that you can see my face better. I apologize. Okay, so you can see that sick leave buyout is included. Also, one of the things that we put on hold last year was our capital replacement due to COVID. We are bringing that back with $400,000 at the level that we were before with the rec center. I'm also going to talk a little bit later about a new plan, a capital replacement plan that we're proposing for recreation programs throughout the city. We also are doing capital replacement for general fund assets, excluding City Hall here because we're going to be leaving this building in a year and don't feel like with its aging structure that we would put additional funds in. So we have not included funding for capital replacement in City Hall. We've also restored training and operating expenses and employee recognition. I would also add that we've included adding an economic development position. There are 2 that are not filled, but in this budget, we're recommending filling one of those positions. Also in the fiscal 2020 budget, 2 of our community neighborhood service positions were funded by CDBG. In this year's budget, we're funding those 2 positions by the general fund. And then we have 2 code compliance officers that were not filled last year, and we're recommending filling both of those. One effective July 1st, the other one effective January 1st. We had a vacant engineering position that we did not fill and include in the budget last year, and we are recommending that we fill that position in this upcoming year. Also, there was, due to COVID at the time when we were preparing the budget, our rec programs were pretty much at a standstill because of the challenges with COVID-19, and now things are turning back to normal, and so we're recommending filling that rec program coordinator. The justice court clerk position, we continue to have restrictions put on our justice court from the state courts, and we are starting to slowly see some things expanding, but still are waiting for further guidance. And so we're recommending that we don't fill that part-time position as part of this budget. And then there were various parks and rec functions that were basically down, and the Parks and Rec felt like they could save in various areas. And now, as things are turning back to normal, we're recommending that those also be added. They're included in the budget. You scroll down just a little bit farther. I'd like to maybe just talk a little bit about the supplemental requests and what we're recommending funding with the supplemental requests. First is we're recommending that we fund 1 police officer position, which would include the uniform, equipment, and a patrol car. Another thing that we're recommending is something that we've talked about for some time, but we've had some operating budget needs for the police department that just have been insufficient for a number of years. And what we're recommending is typically when we recruit police officers, there's a timing element to get those replacements in due to what it takes to recruit, to train, to test, and then also to provide them the training and what they need to be able to do to be an officer. And so what we're recommending as part of this budget is to take 2 positions, and actually the total dollar amount related to those 2 positions would be $176,000. And we show that, we basically treat that in the budget as a credit. And then we're recommending to go into the police department and also dispatch, but primarily the police department, and increase budgets such as ammunition and training and other key areas to be able to give them the ability to spend for those. And just knowing that in the past, we've always had extra funding because of that transition time to go from as we replace officers. But we just mentioned, and we've talked to the police department about this and Chief Ferguson, that if for some reason this year were to be different and they were to be able to keep all their positions filled during the year, and this would not give them adequate funding, what we would do is come back to the council and ask for appropriation so that they could, in essence, have all those positions filled. But we feel that it's not likely in most cases. It just takes time to handle that transition, and so we're recommending to give them more flexibility in their operating budget to take this approach. I know a number of larger cities or cities similar our size have kind of taken this approach so that you can utilize those dollars and best use those in operational needs. And so that's our recommendation. A year and a half ago, we created the Development Services Department, and we took our community development and we split it into community and neighborhood services and developmental services. And as we've been looking at the budget in development services, it's apparent that they just don't have adequate funds for them to be able to meet their needs. And so we're recommending that we fill those, we provide that budget to them of $30,050 so they can meet those essential needs for a new department so they can focus in those areas. Scroll down a little bit. In Parks and Rec, we have some new areas that they're maintaining, particularly on the BRT transit areas in Provo and also along Cougar Boulevard. There are some areas that require landscaping maintenance, and they have not had the budget for that. And so we're recommending that we provide that budget so that they can adequately maintain those areas. If you scroll down just a little bit farther, Fleet has also recommended that they would like to fill 2 intern positions to help them as they're working on their needs, recommending to do that. And then wastewater has recommended $10,000 in wastewater overtime to help them as they're transitioning into the new treatment plant and work on their operational needs. Some other funding items, in addition to restoring cuts and supplemental requests, we are recommending continued support of the parking coordinator position. The council recently approved an appropriation to fill that position, and so we've included that position for the full year in the budget. There was also an independent committee that every 4 years reviews the compensation for the mayor and council wages, and they have come back with a recommendation that's effective in January, and so we've included that as part of the budget. The budget includes, we had had earlier discussions, but as we've thought about it longer, we think it makes more sense on our transfer that we do for the airport property purchase. We created a loan with the energy department, and we think one of the things that we had talked about is each year when we make that transfer, that we do an assessment at the airport to see if they could pick up a portion of that transfer. We did an appropriation for this with the council a couple of months ago, kind of late winter, early spring. And what our recommendation is that we address that again next year and kind of have a discussion with the council on where things are from a profitability standpoint with the airport, whether or not they have the ability to fund a portion of it. And if not, then we would just do an appropriation out of fund balance for that. And so that's what we're recommending, how we handle that airport property purchase payment. Also, want to talk a little bit about the funding recommendation that I talked about earlier with the rec center. As we mentioned, typically there's been $400,000 that we've set aside in their equipment replacement fund to handle replacements to help keep the rec center looking new and keep the equipment in operation and to make sure that we can adequately maintain that facility. As we've talked with Parks and Recreation, we've agreed to propose a new funding model. Currently, Parks and Rec Department sells, as you're aware, the Triple Play Season Pass that provides access to amenities at the Rec Center, at the Peaks Ice Arena, and the Timpanogos Golf Club. To meet the capital needs of these three facilities, beginning in fiscal 22, a funding mechanism will be established, which will create a new fund that will be called the Recreation Facilities Capital Fund. And then each year, after the completion of the fiscal year, revenues will be compared with expenses for the rec center net income. The general fund will contribute to the Recreation Facilities Capital Fund the first $400,000 of net income. If net income for the rec center exceeds $400,000, the general fund will contribute half of the amount that exceeds the $400,000 to the Recreation Capital Fund. The other half will fall to fund balance. You scroll down just a little bit, please, John. If the fund balance at the Peaks Ice Arena or the Timpanogos Golf Club exceeds 25% of revenues, a transfer of the excess then would also be made to the Recreation Facilities Capital Fund. Then what our Parks and Rec staff and administration would do is, as they assess capital needs at each one of these three facilities, they could use this Recreation Facilities Capital Fund as a resource to address those needs. And both the Parks and Rec Department and administration feels like this is a really good model in providing them the funding that they need. It's positive because it's based on their profitability. It also has some positive signs because the general fund tends to be rewarded by it as well as them for good operations. And so that is what is recommended and is part of the current budget that's been submitted. Next item, as we've looked at funding for IT infrastructure for the new City Hall Public Safety Building, we're recommending $642,474 is included in this budget. The telecom fund, which has been established to maintain the fiber optic network of the city and also to set aside money for those needs going forward. We're recommending that we're going to use $147,500 from that to go towards this infrastructure, as well as to utilize money from the equipment replacement fund for the existing city center in the amount of $494,974. What we've been doing, as you're aware, over the years, is we've been setting aside money for the existing city center to meet the needs to be able to provide replacement of equipment and various needs so that we can keep the city hall up and operational. As we're getting to the end of the life of the building, we have about 620 tons for IT infrastructure needs in the new building. And then the plan would be, as we move into the new city hall and public safety building, that we would work with Dick Blackham and consultants to go through and analyze all the systems in the new building and come up with estimated lives. And then we would plan in fiscal 23 to start setting aside money for those needs in the new city hall and public safety building. As far as a breakdown on the needed IT infrastructure, the first item is network equipment and equipment that works with giving us connectivity to the internet and other trusted governmental agencies. This portion is where we feel like there's good justification in using roughly half or that 147,500 to meet this need. We feel like that goes consistent with what that telecom fund was established for. The next component is a phone system replacement. Our current phone system origins back to the late 1990s. It's just an old system that's pretty antiquated, and it just makes little sense to take that system and take it apart and move it over and put it in our new building. What the intent and the recommendation is that we actually utilize or purchase a newer system that provides all the new benefits of technology, that works to that's hosted and works through the internet, that provides just great flexibility in providing that system. The next area is a wireless network. We currently have in the city some wireless access points that can be moved over, but that only accounts for about a third of the needs just due to the size of the new building. And so this funding would ensure that we'd have all the Wi-Fi equipment needed to be installed in the new building. And then finally, a storage area network. We're recommending replacing the existing aging data storage infrastructure and upgrade the capabilities to meet the growing data needs of the city when moving to the new City Hall and Public Safety Building. So that is the IT infrastructure that's recommended in the budget and how we propose to fund for it. You could just I would also mention that as far as Provo 360 goes, we are actively working on our Workday implementation, and the plan is right now we're shooting for going live on July 1st. And so as we start fiscal 22, our plan and goal is to be up and operational on the Workday product, which will be one of the last applications on Provo 360. We continue to want to have and work on a number of other components related to it, but just wanted to give you that progress report. You scroll down a little bit further in the summary. I just like to mention that Provo City has been recognized as our community of choice by recent national accolades and the citizen survey results. Our goal is to provide residents with the services they need in an efficient and transparent manner. I believe the budget process forces us to make difficult decisions and prioritize what items should be funded. The city continues to make difficult decisions to reduce ongoing costs and strengthen revenues. And if you scroll down a little bit, John, for fiscal year 2022, the administration is proposing a balanced budget. During the 2022 budget process, there has been an attempt to make good financial decisions and consider both the short-term and long-term impacts. We welcome and encourage your careful review of our recommended budget. We also welcome the input of our residents as we proceed through the process of adopting the city's annual budget. As always, our staff is at your disposal to respond to questions and assist in any way the municipal council would like over the next several weeks. We believe you will find this budget responsive to your concerns and aspirations and forward-thinking, and we plan to work together for the future of the Provo community. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Borgen? Mr. Strachan?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to just advise that we will start reviewing the budget materials, and we'll have at least one budget retreat on this issue or work meeting on the issue. And then we are planning on the public hearings on June 1st and 15th.
Thank you, Mr. Strachan. We will now open this item for public comment. And I want to mention that during the open public comment period, there were some technical difficulties. So we're going to reopen that after we're finished with item number 1. So if you have a comment specifically pertaining to the tentative budget, item number 1, we welcome your comments now. If you have a more general comment, please wait until we're finished with this particular agenda item. So let's see, I see 3 hands up. Melanie McCord. Oh, okay. Melanie, does your comment pertain to the budget, or was it intended for the open public comment portion? See, do we need to do something so she can? Okay. Do I need to do something to enable her to speak?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Melanie.
Yeah, a little thing just came up that said unmute. I was waiting for that.
Okay.
First, I think John Borgett is a treasure. I don't think you appreciate him enough. The second thing is, I'm not sure about that formula on the Parks and Recreation thing, on the buyback. It seems to me that if the Recreation Center is returning more than is needed to pay on its loan, that money, all of it, total of it, should go back, stay in Parks and Recreation. I know you've got the RAP tax, and I know you've got this legacy fund going on, but there are some other really good things that you could do with the money that's above and beyond the bond that needs to be paid. And I'd like to talk to you about that at some time. I'll put it in an email. That's all I have to say, except that, yeah, I think it ought to stay in Parks and Recreation. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Shipley, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get my hand up in time to ask John a quick question. Since we didn't have a chance to review it and can now look at the numbers, obviously we can review this more in detail over the upcoming weeks. But could you just give us a sense of what we're projecting for 2022, our fiscal year 2022, as far as revenue? Are we projecting it flat? Are we I know the goal is always a balanced budget at this point. We just got a indication earlier today in our work meeting that, the year-to-date numbers for fiscal 21 are very strong, are very good. Are we expecting flat revenue numbers? Are we projecting those to come to our balanced budget, or are we assuming some kind of growth for 22?
I would say we are assuming some growth. As I mentioned in the work session earlier when we were reviewing the quarter report, we are projecting to be up 10%, roughly 9.83% for this current fiscal year for sales tax. As also you're aware, we continue to feel like we're going to be seeing some benefits in the near future from the relief funds that residents and individuals have received, and we think that's continuing to kind of stimulate the economy and see that impact. It's not going to go on for years, but it definitely could provide, and we feel like it will provide some benefit going into fiscal 22 as well. And so we have kind of went through and forecasted the end of this year, and then we are projecting a 5% increase for fiscal 2022 for sales tax. And we also went back and looked over the last 5 years, and 4 out of those 5 years, we've had a 5% increase. And so we feel like it's a reasonable forecast. You're always a little nervous because you don't know for sure what's going to happen. But we feel like this is a number that's attainable, and so that's what we've included in our assumption. Our other revenues, just trends and information, and we've met with each of the departments, and we can get into those more specifically. Property tax, of course, we're just looking at kind of normal growth rates for property tax, and then with the rec center, as they returning back to normal, revenues are increased there, and so I would say that we feel like that we're being that things are going to be pretty good as we look at the state economy and what's happening in the state of Utah. It's hard to not take that into consideration as we look at forecasting how things are going to go forward. So that's the approach, and we can get more into the specifics in our work sessions coming up.
All right, we'll go back to public comment. Are there any others that wanted to comment on this particular agenda item? Okay, not seeing any, so we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Remembering that we won't be voting on adopting this until our next meeting, and we're going to have plenty of time for discussion over the next few weeks. Mr. Harding.
Thanks. Just a quick question. So it sounds like we are increasing the police force by one position, or is it two positions? I wasn't clear on that.
It's one position.
One position. Okay.
We're doing two things. We're increasing it by one position, and then we are, in essence, creating a credit that accounts for the fact that it takes time to replace positions and fill positions. And then we're taking that credit and increasing the police's operating budget so that they can meet important needs in their operations.
Okay. All right. And then I just wanted a little clarification that for the money that's going to be transferred into the recreation facilities capital fund, that is not the money that's above and beyond the bond repayment. That's just the money above and beyond the operations. Is that a good way to characterize it?
It is, and I would say that basically that happens after the fact. And so what we would do is we would actually wait until the end of fiscal 22 when the numbers are closed, and we would look at revenues that have come in. We would look at expenses that have been paid out to determine what the net income is for that facility, looking at direct revenues, direct expenses. And then if it equals 400,000, then we would move that money over to the new recreation facilities fund, and then they would use that for their needs. Now, what we've been doing in the past, prior to COVID, is we just pretty much just gave them the 400,000, and they would use that on replacement needs. Now they've got to demonstrate and show profitability for the direct cost of the facility before that happens. But if they're able to generate additional revenues, if they're able to watch and monitor their expenses, and if it does generate, let's say 600,000 then 100,000 would drop to the general fund balance, or 100 would be moved over to the this new fund. And I would also mention that the new fund, they would not be able to spend money out of that new fund until it was appropriated by the council, or if it was included in a subsequent budget, but it would be subject to council approval. They wouldn't have the ability to just go and spend it without that being approved.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hoban?
Yeah, I just briefly want to say thank you to John and his team and the administration for, considering our our wishes and desires, and listening to what we're, some of the things that were important to us, and finding ways to make things work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council at this point?
Mr. Chair, I would just encourage council, if you think of questions, you should have a copy of that document in your email tonight or tomorrow morning. Is that correct, John?
Yes, actually, right now, John has that. I would just mention that the budget highlights document is a really good summary. You're going to want to get into other deep details, but as far as going through and reviewing that closely, it gives you a real good feel for what's included in the budget and what's not. And so I would encourage you to do that as well as utilizing the budget. And that's one of the reasons that we actually, it's actually included in the budget document itself, but we post it out on our website separately, just so that residents and individuals of interest can also have that to look at to get a good feel for what's in the budget.
Council members, I would encourage you, as you come up with ideas as you're reviewing the document, just to send me the questions, and we'll collect them and feed you back, get you answers as soon as we have them, and then you'll have that material in front of you as well.
Sounds good. And I'd just like to thank the mayor and John and her whole team for addressing our priorities and putting together the budget. I imagine it's been a busy couple of weeks recently. So thank you. Now at this time, because of the technical difficulties we had during the public comment period, there were at least one and perhaps several people that were not able to make their comments. So we're going to reopen that at this time. Those of you who wish to talk about an item that is not on tonight's agenda, if you're calling in by telephone, press *9 on your phone to raise your hand. And remember, there's about a 30-second delay from live to YouTube and Facebook broadcast. If you're dialing in on Zoom, then just use the raise hand feature on Zoom.
Mr. Sewell, we have two hands up. The first, Jerry Hancock by phone is beat out Melanie McCord, but she's now in the panelist category. So Jerry Hancock would be first.
Okay, we'll hear from Jerry.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Does that work? Okay, so I own Sub-Zero Ice Cream. I don't live in the city. I live in American Fork. But anyway, I've had a parking issue with Provo Town Square and had many parking issues, but really the point of the matter is that I wanted to just make a comment and thank the two Daves on the city council for assisting me and calling me back and dealing with it. I'm not sure if there's going to be a resolution. But at any rate, I really appreciate their efforts to listen and intercede. So that's all I really had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Let's see, we'll go over now to next is meeting. Pardon? Melanie McCord.
Hi, Dave. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Well, I'm checking to see if the council members are getting my emails. I seldom hear back from anyone. I don't know if I'm wasting my time. I've sent you another one today. I hope you'll read it. I'm also, I post quite a lot of things on our Provo that I would love to get some feedback from the council on. I don't hear from you. I do hear from Dave Harding occasionally, and every once in a while from George. But the thing that I was concerned about that I wanted to talk to you about now was a statement that Shannon Hellsworth made during work session about the general plan, about how we should sort of start over.
Did we lose the connection? Melanie, I don't know if you can still hear us, but we lost your video about 10 seconds ago. Okay. Next caller is, shows meeting 3D art on my screen.
Yeah, that's me. This is just my YouTube account, but so this is what I want to talk about. So what we're just talking about the budget, right? Like that, like this guy talked about. Wait, so we're just talking about our budget, right, and what we can spend it on, right? Well, I propose that we could spend on reflective paint on our roads. I feel like that would save a lot of lives, and it would be like save like during the rain and like with snow and everything. I could hardly see our lines, and I feel like if we had reflective paint on our streets, it would save a lot of lives, and it'd be an easy thing. Like I don't know. I feel like it'd be not too hard of a thing to implement. And is that like not part? Is that not like on topic?
Thank you for your comment. Could you state your name for the record also, please?
My name is Lucas Terry.
Lucas Terry?
Yep, Lucas Terry. Lucas Brian Terry, if you need to know my middle name.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Terry.
Is this off topic? Just so you know. If I need to do this later, talk about this later.
You've still got another minute. I thought you were finished. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm just asking if that was off topic.
Hey, Lucas,
Yeah.
just to clarify, so it's not really a discussion.
Oh,
It's
not
more
really.
so the council. Yeah, it's more so the council just listening to concerns and
Oh
kind
yeah,
of hearing what the public has to say.
I feel like
But Lucas,
that'd
if you
Sorry.
if you want to just go ahead and email me, I can maybe facilitate a little bit more of a conversation or get you a response.
Of course. Your name was in the description or something like that, or
So just actually, if you want to just email council at provo. Let's see, provo.org, provo.gov. I can't remember now.
okay, yeah, of course. That's okay. I got the
Council at provo.org. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll email you later.
All right.
Guess-
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. And thank you, Mr. Hoban, for jumping in there. I was having a little trouble hearing what he was saying there. So,
Melanie McCord is back. Her hand's not up at the moment, but don't know if she finished or she got cut off.
okay, I see her hands up. So go ahead, Melanie. Okay. Melanie, go ahead and finish your comment from where you were cut off before.
I'm going to have to start coming to these meetings. Your technical difficulties are so frustrating to me. I can't get in. I get cut off. Can't hear me. No, this isn't okay. The general plan update that you're doing is a process that needs to be honored, and you cannot, as Shannon Ellsworth said, start over. No, that won't do. The hundreds and thousands of hours and effort that the citizens and the neighborhoods have put into the neighborhood specific plans and into the updates over the years need to be honored, and the general plan should not be changed unless it's done through the amendment process, which includes public hearings, planning commission, neighborhood meetings, and everything else. Do not weaken this tool that you have and that the residents have by starting over. That's all. Oh, except that I'd really like it if you'd read my emails and somebody would respond to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie. There's no other hands for public comment, so we will close public comment. I have one note here from staff that mentions that it's helpful to update your Zoom app regularly. That might help a little bit on some of these problems. That's just a suggestion we'll throw out there. All right, we'll come back now and move on to item number 2, which is an ordinance amending Provo City Code Chapter 14.20B. And any members of the public who would like to give a comment on this item are encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item will be presented by Melissa McNally, our management analyst.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The Community and Neighborhood Services Department is requesting an amendment to Provo City Code Chapter 14.20B for the Freeway Commercial Two, or the FC2 zone. John, can you go to the next slide? So one of the major changes in this proposed amendment is regarding building height and its proximity to the neighborhood. The maximum height that we would allow is 15 stories or 150 feet. We realize that's really tall, and that's just to allow some flexibility for developers. The maximum height within 100 feet of any single family property shall not exceed 4 stories or 48 feet. Structures within 100 to 200 feet shall not exceed 6 stories or 72 feet in height. It was mentioned there was during work session today that there's some concern that we considered the FC2 zone that's close to Center Street, which we did when we were making the amendments, or the proposed amendments to this code. So do you want to go to the next slide, John? Okay. And one of the other major changes was written specifically for property along Lakeview Parkway. This requires parcels that have frontage on Lakeview Parkway to have a 65-foot transitional setback from the property line of any parcel developed within single-family residential uses. It also requires certain landscaping requirements to provide vertical screening to the abutting neighborhood, and coordination with Parks and Recreation Department to incorporate existing and proposed trail systems in the area. And that's all I have for this item.
Are there any questions? If we don't have any questions, then we'll open this item for public comment. And it looks like we do have a comment.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Could you state your name?
This is Becky Bogdan, the Lakewood Neighborhood Chair.
Hi.
First of all, I would like to thank staff in the Planning Commission for considering the neighborhood and being very thoughtful in how they would proceed forward with this. The one concern I do have is in the code there, it says that the Development Services Director has the ability to change things. That does concern me because if we're looking at a buffer system, the neighborhood's under the impression that if we take away the LDR node, that 65 feet will be there to protect them and their homes. And the vertical screening of trees will be there to buffer their house from any commercial. And so if that's to remain in there, I do have a concern that the neighborhood is still respected by the visual screens and by the setbacks that are set there, that doesn't change, that does stay the same. Do you have any questions for me? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, we'll close this item and bring it back to the council for discussion. Wasn't that comment addressing a different agenda item, that last comment?
No, that actually should be for this item, Chair.
Okay. I guess I was thinking of the one with the LDR zone buffer.
So there's a provision, what Ms. Bogdan was talking about is there's a provision that's proposed in this amendment that does give a little bit of leeway to the Development Services Director. We have found in the past that allowing the director to have a little bit of leeway as far as the precise zone yard requirements and things like that does help in the development process. However, if the council doesn't feel comfortable with that, we have no reservations about that.
Could you bring up on the screen the section that talks about the flexibility that you're referring to there?
So it should be at the bottom left side.
Yeah, item number 4, underneath the drawing.
May modify, the Development Services Director may modify any of the above requirements subject to finding that the following conditions exist. Okay. All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to the council for any further discussion and questions then. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair Sewell. So I guess the two concerns. One concern that I have, I thought I had another one, but I've been thinking about the first, so I don't know. Maybe the other one is related to one of the other two items that I feel are all kind of interrelated. So let me start with this one. Just and I brought these up in the work meeting, and I appreciated the kind of the response here that this has been considered the impact on how what the impact would be on the areas that are currently zoned FC2. But in the report and report of action, or staff report and the report of action, I mean, perhaps it's been considered, but I didn't see any discussion of that, and so I don't know what the impact would be on the area that's currently zoned FC2. But FC2 is defined in Chapter 1420B, and the first section of that is purpose and objectives. And I don't see any proposed changes to this, but it reads, the Freeway Commercial Two zone is established to provide a transition between the freeway commercial area and the gateway into downtown. The primary use of the land is for commercial and service uses to serve regional population needs as well as local residents, and should not compete with downtown. Skipping down a little bit. No, I mean, that I guess that's enough. So, and again, we had this discussion earlier. Should we have intent, descriptions of intent and that in our in our code. Some places we have it, like here, some places we don't. Are we concerned about making changes to the code and then not updating places where we have put in the intent? I don't feel strongly. I do like having intent and context, just kind of that background information in our code. I think it's overall it's helpful. If we decided we don't want that, I can live with that. But I do think where we have it, I think it should be kept up to date. And so that's one issue that I would have to approving this, and you know, perhaps it could be continued for a couple of weeks, and this could be addressed if staff feels like it should be addressed. And I can stop here, or there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. Mr. Mills, I'm happy to either pause here or go on to the other one.
Up to you. I'm happy to just address your concerns, whether here or later.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to express that I think that intent is really important. And as we thought about drafting this zone, the intent was definitely taking into consideration. I apologize that there isn't a lot of discussion of that in the staff report or the report of action. We can definitely improve on that. But if you really think about the wording and the fact that the FC2 zone is a gateway to downtown, that doesn't necessarily just have to be east or west. It can also be north and south. And so given the proximity and the very similar circumstances to our other FC2 zone is at the Center Street entrance to our city off of the freeway. And this particular property that we're talking about tonight shares those same kind of gateway characteristics. And so we felt that the intent was actually still compliant. And we definitely wanted to take that into consideration, that this is an area that would not compete with downtown, that the intent of this zone and the intent of downtown are actually quite different. And so we felt that they actually matched up pretty well. The other thing that I would just make mention is one reason that we really wanted to implement a step back requirement was taking into account both existing residential zones that are in the existing FC2 zone area. And so any part of the existing FC2 zone the height limitation would change to require that if it's within 100 feet of a residential area, the height limit is only 4 stories or 48 feet. And up to 200 feet back, it only goes up to 6 stories or 72 feet. And so essentially, if you think about it, the way this would develop out in both of these zones is the height would come at the locations that are farthest from any residential area. And those areas that are closer to the residential area would be stepped back at an appropriate level. So I apologize that those items weren't specifically addressed in the staff report, but definitely taken into consideration, and we share your concerns. So.
Okay, thank you. And you kind of started addressing my second concern, so let me get to that. But yeah, and I guess when we say the gateway, you know, the Center Street west of 5th West and between the 5th West and the freeway, you know, is zoned as you know, gateway zones. But I'm open to calling, you know, University Avenue, yeah, University Avenue headed in there. I could see calling that the gateway, or extending that term to cover that as well. But it does say transition between the freeway commercial area, which in my interpretation is the FC1 zone, that is the FC2 is between the FC1 zone and the gateway, West Gateway zone. So it still doesn't seem to quite fit, but I see where you're getting at that. More substantial though is definitely understanding how this applies and how this would affect the currently zoned FC2. So help me. You talked about residential areas. I think that it goes off of residential properties. So basically the property line. So 100 feet from the single family property line, which I believe is about mid-block along Center Street. So buildings within that, sorry, I mean, I bring this up because I was very involved in the creation of the Gateway, West Gateway, Freeway Commercial zones, and we've worked on this a lot over the years. And so I'm trying to think what this changes, because this does change what the standards are. So buildings within 100 feet.
So currently, the way it would work is in the existing FC2 zone, it's actually bordered by some R1, I think it's R16 or R18 residential, and also some RC, some residential conservation zone. So at any point from those borders, where the RC stops and where the FC2 begins, you would have to go back 100 feet towards the freeway, actually. Any direction away from the residential zone. For that first 100 feet, the height limitation is set at 4 stories or 48 feet. And then once you get past 100 feet, from the 100 to 200 foot mark, then it's set at 6 stories or 72 feet. So essentially, in the existing FC2 zone, the closer that you would get to the freeway, the taller the building could be, which it makes a lot of sense because it preserves the residential nature of the zone while also allowing opportunity for the more intense height area to be closer to the freeway for visibility.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Currently, it's 3 stories, 50 feet. Throughout the zone, regardless of how far away you are from the residences. And if I remember right, blocks are roughly 400 feet. Residences usually go about midway, so we're talking if anything within that first quarter. Is there a setback? What are the setbacks from that property line? I mean, how close could that building be within that 100 feet?
10 feet.
10 feet. So you could have a property line for a single family detached. 10 feet later, you could have a 4-story building, and then that front quarter of the block, it could be 6 stories, roughly twice what is currently allowed there. What is the height limit in the Freeway Commercial 1? Do you know that offhand?
Just 1 second, and I can get that for you. I think it's the same.
Same as three stories, or same as?
Okay, it's 3 stories, but
so
I will confirm that.
So we kind of have a transition from Freeway Commercial 1, which was intended to be the more intense use, that's capped at 3 stories, and then we go to the transition zone, which can go up to 6 stories probably in this area, and then back down to the West Gateway. Thank you for engaging with me on these questions. It's helping me kind of get familiar, because the last thing I want is for some unintended consequences. And I'm glad that you guys have considered this. I think I will request a continuation. Maybe I can just sit down and we can sketch some stuff out and look at the maps a little bit, like we've done with these zones in the past when we've made changes to it. I'd love just to get a little more comfort with it before voting on it.
No problem. So yes, the FC1 zone is also 3 stories, maximum of 50 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Councilor Ellsworth?
Yeah, sorry, this is a comment. I just think that this is an appropriate and I think it would benefit this area. I think it's a really fair edit to our ordinances that would advance our economic development goals in this area.
Thank you. Counselor Hoban?
I was just going to say that I believe we need 2 council members now to continue an item. So I'll support Councilmember Harding in that.
Very good. You're quick on the draw, Mr. Hoban. All right, this item is continued until our next meeting. We'll move on to item number 3, which is an ordinance amending the general plan Southwest area future land use map designation for approximately 10 acres of real property, generally located approximately 1850 south, 500 west from LDR to commercial. And this item will be presented by Melissa McNally, management analyst.
Thank you. So we are requesting a general plan amendment to the Southwest area future land use map. If you want to go to the next slide. There is this portion that is zoned LDR, and we are proposing that it be rezoned to commercial. This is sorry. Sorry about that. So on this property, there is, if you just scroll to the next slide, there is a dike on the north side of this property. It raises the land up about 7 feet. The first photo is a view from the property looking towards that neighborhood to the north. And you can see how high up that is as you're, it's approaching the roof line. And then the second photo is taken from the property line looking toward the dike. So you can see how high that is. So any development that happens in this area has to be brought up to that level of the dike in order to bring that parcel of land out of the floodplain. And the neighborhood expressed a very strong desire for LDR to not be located on that piece of property. It was initially the intention of having it zoned LDR was to provide a buffer between that neighborhood to the north and any commercial development that would happen to the south of the neighborhood. And the neighbors expressed concern over houses being placed that high up and looking straight down into windows and into backyards. There were some privacy concerns and that sort of thing. So their desire is to not have that be zoned LDR and to have it commercial. That has been, that zoning proposal has been received favorably by the neighborhood. And that's all I have for this item.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you. We'll open this item up for first for comment by the neighborhood chair, and then for a public hearing. I think that's also Becky Bogdan, isn't it? I don't know if she's still, is she still with us? She's not here. Okay. Then we'll open it for any public comment. Not seeing any hands raised. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for any discussion. Counselor Harding.
I'm curious what the council thinks on the status of this request. If, does the staff still want to move forward with it, even though the FC2 zone has been continued for another 2 weeks? So that might be a question. I don't know if I feel like I'm constantly the sole voice of dissent or concern. I'm trying to stay consistent with at least my understanding of city goals and city plans, and sometimes it seems like we're being asked to go one direction, sometimes we're being asked to go in a different direction. And with all that we've talked about, trying to address the housing affordability question, removing a small sliver of LDR, thank you, from, that was at least sold to me as a good buffer. And again, the questions I had earlier, are we planning, when we've been talking about, well, we've kind of got to stick to this overall plan so we can stick to the 4 units to the acre. Do we plan to make this up elsewhere? Will we have applicants trying to claim this lost density? I don't know what that is. I don't know where that puts us, but it does feel like a departure from the plans that we had previously approved. So I don't feel, I'm torn on this one. I'm not strongly against it, but I'm feeling a little lost.
Counselor Ellsworth.
Yeah, I really support this proposal, assuming that the property owner does not oppose it. I think that this is a great idea. Building townhomes as a buffer between commercial and between a neighborhood that's adjacent to a freeway is not necessarily a better alternative than just having a semi-vacant buffer, right? Which is kind of what this would create. There would be a landscaped buffer between a structure that is built there and between the neighborhood. And I know that staff is working to make sure that that's not unusable space, but that it's a safe space. And I think that there are many opportunities for LDR west of I-15. There's a number of units that we've approved in this immediate area that are townhomes, and I think they're LDR. So I don't feel like that this is a major hit to our objective to facilitate more semi-affordable housing. I think that this LDR, if necessary, could just be massaged and moved into another part of the west side if that's possible. And overall, I think the highest goal that this facilitates is economic development. This would be a phenomenal location for a grocery store or a major retailer. And I think those folks who live there understand that. And there's just very limited space adjacent to our awkward interchanges where we can do something like this. We haven't made it work. We haven't made major retail work at the opposite side of this interchange where Micro Focus is, or where the golf course and the medical school are. So let's make it work here.
Thank you. Other comments from council members? Councilor Fillmore.
You're on mute, I think.
You think right. I just wanted to say amen, I guess, to what Councilor Ellsworth is saying about this particular parcel. I can appreciate Councilor Harding's questions and concerns, but I think the highest and best use of this property is clearly for commercial. Being right at that freeway exchange, it's simply a commercial opportunity we don't dare forego. And for that reason, I'm in favor of the items 3 and 4 on the agenda. I just think that it's We have lots of opportunities for LDR, but very few for this kind of commercial development.
Thank you. Any other counselors that want to make a first comment before we come back for seconds? Counselor Henley.
Yeah, I support this. I'm comfortable moving forward with it tonight.
Counselor Shipley.
Yeah, I support this as well. I just wonder if if staff would like to answer Mr. Harding's question about any reservations in light of continuing the other one.
Let me just jump in, council members. I think that, and I definitely empathize with Councilmember Harding. Lots of things are nuanced, and in this particular case, it would be honestly my recommendation that if you feel strongly and in support of item number 3, that could go forward. My only reservation with item number 4, the actual zone change that we'll cover in just a moment, is that there is the possibility that if you rezone it to FC2, it's going to have the existing language in there that does not have a buffer language. So there is the remote possibility that somebody could submit an application under the existing zoning if you were to change it tonight, and that existing buffer language would not be there and they would not be subject to that. So those are kind of my cautionary statements on that. The item 3, I think, is fine if you're supportive of that to go forward. If you are continuing the actual language amendments to FC2, then I would recommend that you would also continue the zone change.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. I'll just make a quick first comment. Also, this sounds like a good idea to me as well for the reasons that have been mentioned. And then we'll back to Councilor Harding.
Yeah, it's not a comment. It's just a simple clarification question. There's been some statements that the highest and best use for this area is commercial, and I strongly, fully agree with that. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but my understanding of, if I'm reading this correctly, is that this does not actually increase the usable commercial space in this area. All we're doing is swapping out an area that would be buffered using single family attached homes, and we're taking out that buffer and we're putting in a landscaped buffer. So the actual usable commercial space does not grow with this proposal, or am I mistaken in that?
No, that is the intent.
That's the intent. And I also think, though, that it's important to consider the context, that FC2 is like, it is the most intense of our commercial uses. Its intense is to be regional, especially given the nature of being right by a freeway interchange. And so I think that while oftentimes townhouses and things like that can be an excellent buffer between commercial areas that maybe aren't quite as intense, like an SC2 or an SC1 type of zone that is more neighborhood commercial and things like this. The idea of having townhouses directly next to a major Costco facility or something like that might not be the best thing. I don't know, but just considering the context, we feel that this is the best way to go. That in any way doesn't mean that you may in the future receive a proposal from an applicant that incorporates some of those intents of having residential back in, and they may be doing it in a way that is just amazing. And so those are things that the council can consider at that time. This is just our best estimation and best guess of how to handle this particular piece of property given its current context.
Is FC2 more intense than FC1? I thought FC1 was the more intense of the two.
SC3 is the most intense, that allows for multifamily, then SC2, then SC1 is actually the neighborhood commercial. So very small.
Are we talking SC or FC? Like
FC.
FC. So I thought you said that FC, the zone that we're considering, is the most intense, or did I misunderstand you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
FC2.
And
What I
thought
was giving as an example was S as in Sam.
Gotcha. And I may be mistaken, but I thought Frank, FC1 was the more intense, and then FC2 was kind of almost a transition.
No, I think that FC2 is the more intense one. The list of uses is pretty long. As far as commercial goes.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other comments. So does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Not seeing any hands, so we will go ahead and call for a vote then. Vice Chair Shipley,
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth,
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore,
Yes.
Councillor Hoban.
Yes.
Councillor Hanley,
Yes.
Councillor Harding,
Yes.
and I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes as well. That brings us to item number 4, which is an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 75 acres of real property generally located at 500 West Lakeview Parkway from agricultural A1.20 to Freeway Commercial 2 FC2. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, you're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item will be presented by Melissa McNally, Management Analyst.
Thank you. So we are requesting a zone change along 500 West and Lakeview Parkway, from the A120 zone to the proposed freeway to commercial zone. And there are no specific development plans for this area currently. This is staff trying to make a proactive move to zone this land so that developers know the kinds of development that we would like to see here. Let's see, there were a few comments and current concerns on Open City Hall that you're welcome to go and read. But overall, the rezoning of this area was received favorably by the neighborhood. So are there any questions on this?
Councillor Ellsworth?
I'm curious if there's any statement from the property owner.
No, there is no statement.
Thanks.
Yeah, nothing official, Councillor Ellsworth. We've been in conversations and they've been presented these plans, but nothing officially supporting or requesting anything else.
All right, if there's no further questions, we'll open it up to the neighborhood chair, Becky Bogdan, if she's with us.
Hello, this is Becky Bogdan, the neighborhood chair. I would request that you continue this because that buffer zone, especially now where you voted to take that LDR node off, is very important to the neighborhood. And it would be very much appreciated if you would continue this item to the next meeting and pass them both or reject them both together. This property is currently up for sale. I have had a couple of phone calls, and the desires that most of them have communicated to me is housing throughout, because this portion of, at least the northern portion of this property, all of the property to the north of the Lakeview Parkway, it has visibility issues and it has access issues. And so as far as those that are looking to purchase the property, they're looking to put residential units instead of commercial units on top of this property. Just so you know, that is a little bit of background. But as far as we go, we would really like the opportunity to be protected and to make sure that that buffer zone is intact and that no one messes with it from this point on. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll bring it back to the council for any discussion. Councillor Hanley.
I would like to continue this item for the reasons that Becky Bogdan mentioned and Robert Mills. I think it makes sense to resolve the other issue first.
Is there another councillor that supports the request? Mr. Harding?
It'd be irresponsible not to. So I will support that request.
Thank you. Mr. Harding has supported the request, so we will continue this item and move on to item number 5. An ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 0.23 acres of real property generally located at 734 West, 300 South from residential R16A to low-density residential LDR. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, you're encouraged to call in or sign in now. This item will be presented by our planner, Dustin Wright.
Thank you, Council. Let's see if we can jump to the next slide here, and I'll show you the property here. So here's the property that the applicant owns and like to rezone. Go to the next slide, please. Here's a close-up of the property that they'd like to split. The home that you see there would stay on one of the lots, and a new home would be able to be built on another lot that it would create next to it. Next slide, please. And so the current zoning for this property is the R16A. That's a single-family residential zone. And go to the next slide, and I'll show you the general plan map is designated for a residential land use here. So both the current zoning or the current use of the property and the proposed use will fit with the general plan as far as a residential land use. There's also a Franklin neighborhood plan, which is an appendix to the general plan. It shows this area as not changing from the proposed land use. The future land use map in the Franklin neighborhood plan really is trying to take the residential conservation zone, the RC zone, and apply specific zoning to those properties. But the land use in this still would be residential. So staff has reviewed the request for the rezone at this property and finds that they'd be able to meet the requirements for the proposed LDR low density residential zone. That the request would be consistent with the land use of the general plan. And the Planning Commission has reviewed it, and they've passed or forwarded a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the rezone request at this location. Let's see if there's anything else real quick. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Thanks.
Mr. Harding.
Mills, just help me with this. I understand general plan app says residential. Residential covers a lot of different zones, and this is a zone that would be covered in residential. The future land use map does not show this changing, which my understanding means that no change is recommended. And so the zone is currently R16, and so this would be changing to a different zone than R16, and the proposed, adding an additional house there would not be allowed under the R16, which is why a rezone is being changed. So is it staff's position that this request follows the Franklin neighborhood plan, or that it doesn't follow it, but it's justified anyway?
So I think with the Franklin neighborhood plan, what it's doing is it's looking at zone. So on the future land use map, you're seeing proposed zone changes. So, and those are, if you look at the current zoning map, you'll see that those are mostly going to be the residential conservation, the RC zone.
Right.
So that was kind of the goal in that map, was to say, take the RC zone and what can we replace it with? It'll either be comparable to what's there, but allow for some flexibility, because the RC zone is really kind of freeze that use in what it is and not allow for much change there. So that map was really done to say, here's what we can change today. If we're willing to rezone properties, we could rezone it to these specific zones. And that just hasn't happened yet. That was one of the implementation strategies in the back of the Franklin neighborhood plan, was to amend the zoning map to make those changes. Typically, we haven't moved forward with those unless it's on a kind of a case-by-case basis, as opposed to just going and rezoning a large area. But that's something that could happen. That's kind of what the plan called for. It also called for updating the general plan map, future land use map, so it's different than the zoning. But in this area, so that document would be saying there would be no proposed change to the land use on this property. That would still remain as residential. But like you said, residential, there's a lot of different zones that could apply to that. So that's kind of where position staff has looked at that and said, this is an RC, so there wasn't a proposed zone change. And there isn't necessarily a proposed land use change either. And that's why we felt like this request to go to LDR fits pretty comparable with what's already there in the neighborhood. A lot of the lot widths you see here in the neighborhood are going to be pretty comparable to what this will be when it's split. And so it feels like it would fit pretty well, and it wouldn't be a noticeable change to, I'd say, the untrained eye to feel like, oh, this new property now sticks out quite a bit from the rest. So that's kind of the approach or the view that we've taken on it. That helps answer your question.
So figure 3.3 in the Franklin neighborhood plan is the proposed changes in zoning and land use. This is the caption. And this area is shown with the color of no change. LDR is one of the colors that's here. So areas that are proposed to change from whatever the current zoning is to become LDR at some point in the future. It's not saying that it's not changing it at that time. It's just saying at some point in the future, we feel it appropriate that this will become LDR. But the area that we're talking about now is colored for no change. So, I mean, to me, that's the plan suggesting that this area, properties in this area, the plan is for them not to change. So I do see this as a change from from what the plan calls for. Now, the second part of what you talked about is that as far as lot widths, because this is not very deep at all, it has to be wider in order to get that 6,000, and we're splitting it. So now we're going to be breaking off a piece that's 4,000, but the lot width, I agree with you. The lot width is comparable to other things. So I guess from the street view, it wouldn't necessarily stand out. Though I think the little sketches showed that, you know, the houses are going to be pretty close to each other. What are the foreseen spacing between houses? Do we know that?
It'd be comparable to the existing zone. It'd be 10 feet and 8 feet, as opposed to 10 feet and 10 feet. So on one side, it'd be two feet less, which again, I don't think it's going to be highly noticeable. Or if we can jump to the next, or jump back a slide or two, you can look at the aerial. You'll see that some of the homes adjacent to the west of it are actually built pretty close to the lot lines as well. So again, I don't think we're going to see something that we're not already seeing in the neighborhood. And that's why we feel like it's a comparable land use, that it's going to fit well as an infill development within the neighborhood. And I don't feel like it will stand out or have any major impacts. Kind of like I mentioned earlier as well, as far as the current property goes, they could build an addition or an accessory structure there where this home would be, and then that would have to be rented out as opposed to being able to be owner occupied like it would be in this case. So there's some pros and cons. I think they fit pretty well. So I think it's kind of up to your discretion there. If you feel like there's one that outweighs the other, at the end of the day, I think either way it'll be something that'll work out and it will fit well with the neighborhood, keeping it how it is or making the amended change to the zoning map.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Mr. Hoban?
Yeah, did I miss this? Was there any feedback from the neighborhood on this proposal?
Yeah, they reached out to the neighborhood chair. The neighborhood chair put it on their Facebook page. They didn't have a meeting on it, and it was also placed on the Open City Hall site. I believe last time I checked, there were a few comments that came in, some supporting it, and I think there was one that wasn't supportive of it.
Okay.
We'll be hearing from the neighborhood chair, I believe, in just a minute.
Okay, I'll save my other question for the discussion.
Any other questions for Mr. Wright? All right, thank you. We'll invite comment from the neighborhood chair, Jeff Franz. Oh, the applicant, excuse me.
Yeah. Is it okay for me to speak, or did you want the chair?
Yeah, no, you can speak first. That's great.
All right, fantastic. First off, thanks to the council for holding this forum for large projects and small like mine. It's great to have our plans aired. I think that building a new cute house, I had a builder over there the other day, and we're walking through some scenarios. 1,500 square feet, maybe 22, 23 feet wide, pretty similar to some of the surrounding houses, and consistent with the Franklin neighborhood character, sort of the pioneer heritage. And I think that would be an added value, new is new, of course. And in terms of the width from the street, they several months back, we all created the LDR 40-foot wide minimum square footage of 4,000 square feet. So, it's on the books, of course. And when I found this property, I thought, well, this is a nice little opportunity, and it fits the land use pattern and whatnot. The councilman, I think, brought up a great point about land use, and as it currently is, it doesn't countenance a change, but I think the change that we're talking about is land use, not the actual zone. I think the land use would remain single family, and I think it would be in consistency with, it would be consistent with the neighborhood character. Were there any questions in terms of intent and whatnot? I mean, I think it's kind of obvious. I mean, if we got it rezoned and then we split it, build a cute little house next door, I mean, it's not a huge scope, high complication kind of a proposal. It's not like the previous ones you've been talking about tonight, but I think it's pretty straightforward and I think it's consistent with the neighborhood. So over.
Any questions for Mr. Rands? Councilor Ellsworth?
I'm curious what is the age of the home on the property, and what's the maybe average age of neighboring homes or housing stock?
So the current house that is on the land was built in 1896. It's really cute. The previous owners had really buttoned it up and remodeled it quite a bit. So it should last a little while, but obviously it's, 120 plus years old. So, if it falls apart in the future, you can clear it out and build something else really cute there. It's really checkerboard in terms of age of the neighborhood. Some are much newer, some are pretty old and needing some rehab, and some are sort of in between. I think in the neighborhood, it's probably, it's 50-50-ish in terms of owner versus rent. And, my plan would be to build something and sell it to someone that would probably want to live there. But of course, I don't want to get sidetracked on like the social dimensions of this, but we can't discriminate against renters or owners. It's just the way neighborhoods develop in downtown area. But I think, again, a newer, nice housing stock that, adds value to the neighborhood and is consistent with the pioneer look and feel. I think that's a good thing overall.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rands.
Thank you.
And then if the neighborhood chair is here, you're welcome to comment at this time. Don't see a matching name in the attendees, so we'll then open the item for public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would wish to comment on this item? Not seeing any comments, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion. Mr. Hoban.
I think I'd just like to ask my fellow council members. So I know there's some nuances to this that Mr. Harding has brought up. From a technicality standpoint, maybe it's not perfect in line or whatever. But I guess, don't we want more, I guess I would call this infill, where we're adding housing stock without like a lot of disruption or without having to build a huge development, kind of creating another lot and home out of thin air. That doesn't really take away from anything else. I guess I'm just wondering, in big picture, as long as it's not totally out of place, don't we want to have more infill like this, regardless of whether technically it falls in line or not? And I know that's why we're here to discuss the change, because it doesn't technically fall in line with things. But anyways, just curious if somebody has any thoughts on, making it a little easier to do infill like this. Seems interesting to me that we spend so much time on, one little house. But I don't know, just curious what everybody else thinks.
Councilor Hanley.
Yes, I was thinking along the same lines as Mr. Hoban, or at least I have my own thoughts about your question. that is yes. I think this is exactly infill is really highly desirable for us to consider whenever possible. I'm not saying that it's always the right thing to do by any means, but it's especially attractive because it's so cost effective. We don't have to build a new street. We don't have to build any new infrastructure to get an increase in housing and housing types in our city in a way that actually can be very attractive and appealing. So it's sort of a gentle way of densifying without massive investment of infrastructure and roads. So I do think our zoning in large portions of Provo have been too inflexible for that. And so in this case, it's a relatively simple proposal. It doesn't have, as far as we can tell, significant opposition. And I think it's got potential for adding a small benefit to the area without undue cost. So I'm supportive of this.
Councilor Ellsworth.
I agree with Mr. Handley.
You get the prize for the most succinct comment tonight.
Rarely my prize.
Other comments? Mr. Fillmore and then Mr. Harding. Mr. Fillmore, are you unmuted?
Yes, I concur. 2 words.
Except that he added 2 more words.
Yes, came close. Mr. Harding.
Councilor Ellsworth says rarely her prize and probably never my prize. I think Travis, hit it on the nose with this. I agree with this. I think everything that Councilor Handley stated, is spot on. My only concern is how well do we stick to the plans? I was here, and at least I think just one other councilor was here when the Franklin neighborhood plan was adopted, and there was a lot of discussion about where LDR was appropriate and where it was not appropriate. And I actually voted against it because I thought LDR should be applied in more areas in Franklin neighborhood. And I think so now I think we should be doing this, but I also think it should be part of the plan, and we shouldn't be somewhat arbitrarily, deciding, or we should be very careful when we decide to go against our plans. And I think Mr. Mills is, maybe it was Mr. Wright. I can't remember who was talking at the time, but there's reasons why, perhaps, this is kind of a property that is not, is a little bit unique. And so, I think the council definitely should exercise judgment and how we apply these principles. But I'm very worried about it. And I'm just, a lot of the things that have been said, like, oh, well, we can add more houses without as much infrastructure, and we can densify and provide housing opportunities. I think a lot of those could apply to that LDR strip that we just took off of a plan. We could have added housing there with very low infrastructure costs, and I think someone said that's not the best place to put the housing, and I agree. But for the people who would move into there, I think they would be glad that wasn't just an empty landscape buffer, but there was actually homes that they could live in. So I know I've heard Councilor Ellsworth say this before, but just kind of struggling with sometimes it seems inconsistent how we vote on this, and sometimes we disagree on what's inconsistent. But I'm feeling like, you know, some of the arguments that were being made to the last item are not being made to this item. So I think I'm going to support this. But I worry about, you know, too easily going against our adopted plans. I really think we should do our best to stay consistent with them in order to give the community assurance or not expectations, but to give them so we don't surprise them. So we provide that consistency, and then we're communicating with developers so they know what to expect. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this.
All right, not seeing any other comments, I'll ask if any council member desires to consider this item again at the next council meeting. Not seeing any raised hands, we'll call for a vote. Councillor Shipley?
Yes.
Councillor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councillor Fillmore?
Yes.
Councillor Hoban?
Yes.
Councillor Hanley?
Yes.
Councillor Harding?
Yes.
And I, Dave Sewell, will vote yes. That brings us to item number 6, our last item for the night, which is an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding conditional uses in the Freeway Commercial FC1 zone. If any members of the public would like to give a comment for this item, you're encouraged to call in or sign in now. And this item will be presented by our planner, Aaron Ardmore.
Now I did it. Okay, so everybody's done it. All right, so the item in front of us tonight is a text amendment to add a conditional use to the Freeway Commercial 1 zone. So let me scroll to that slide. So the conditional use to be added is in front of you. It's Land Use Code 2830. Drug production, cannabis production only, and only when the establishment is ancillary and adjacent to a cannabis distribution facility. So a little bit of background on this. The cannabis production right now is limited to the Freeway Industrial Zone in Provo City. This was a result of the state issuing to cities in order to find places in their city for the cultivation, production, and distribution of medical marijuana. So in Provo City, cultivation was assigned to the A110 zone. Production was assigned to the Freeway Industrial Zone, and distribution was assigned to the Freeway Commercial Zone. I think what wasn't thought of at the time that those three things were adopted into the zone code was an establishment or a business that wants to do 2 or more of these activities, as is the case with the applicants behind this amendment. In this case, a production facility tied to a distribution business. So the idea behind this is that there'd be a production facility, ancillary, and in the back of a distribution store that's already operating in the Freeway Commercial Zone. So if the council was to pass this amendment, this business would have to apply for a conditional use permit through the Development Services Office That would go through a staff review, have a public hearing, and go through that business license procedure. Staff has reviewed this ordinance amendment application. Believe that through some of the economic development goals of kind of an orderly development, economic development goals of kind of reinforcing business, establishing business, and keeping those businesses in Provo City. Because of those goals that we have in the general plan, planning staff has recommended approving this ordinance amendment tonight. Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of this as well. I believe on a vote of 7-1 at the Planning Commission hearing. I believe the applicant should be available tonight for additional questions if you have any. But that's really all I have on this item, unless you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Ardmore? I had one. So under our current code for distribution, which is what the business here is doing, is there any limitation as to where the cannabis can be distributed? I mean, for example, can it be distributed out of state?
That's a good question. I know the one facility that we do have, Desert Wellness, just off Draper Lane. It works essentially like a pharmacy. They have just a walk-in distribution there, where you walk in, you wait, you go, you get your prescription, and you get back in your car and leave. I don't know if they do any shipments. I'm not sure on that end of the business, honestly. I can't answer that.
So to your knowledge, just to clarify, to your knowledge, the code doesn't contain any restriction against shipping out of state for recreational uses?
To my knowledge, I would be surprised if that was allowed just under state code. But I can't guarantee that. No, I don't know if Brian Jones is on with us tonight. He might be able to clarify that.
I'm on, and I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head either. I'd need to go read the Medical Cannabis Act. But given that the act is specifically for medical cannabis, I also would be very surprised if that was permitted for the limited number of licensees that are allowed to do this under state law. But I'd have to read the act to get you a concrete answer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Hanley?
Well, I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is the two products don't even work functionally the same way. So medical cannabis is not going to have recreational appeal, is what I understand, but I could be wrong.
Well, I know very little about this subject, so I'm willing to be educated on that. Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, we will open up this item for comment by the applicant. Is Brittany Johnson here? Or a representative of the applicant? I see a hand up. Cliff, do I need to press the allow to talk button or? Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right, go ahead. Well, it looks like he's muted.
If you're trying for Jarman needs to hit *9 on his phone if he's on phone.
I'm not on the phone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, hi. Jarman Montgomery, I'm an architect with Trio Design. We are currently the representatives for Deseret Wellness, the entity who currently runs the distribution facility for medical cannabis in the FC1 district. I apologize. It's gone the whole night without my daughter kind of having a meltdown, and it happens at the exact time that I'm on the mic, so I apologize in advance. But yes, basically, we're just representatives for the owner to try and allow them to package and produce the material that they're selling on site. They aim to do this with a modular kind of pre-made system that is built on site. And obviously we would submit the drawings for all of this if we were given the conditional use, and allow them to both produce and distribute on the same site without having to procure another, a parcel or lot to do one process of the production in one area and another for distribution in another. So I'm going to mute just because I'm sure she's being really loud. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Where is the product currently being produced?
I am unaware of that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I could look into that and get you an answer.
Probably not important then. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. We'll now open this item for public comment. See any other attendees? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring this back to the council for discussion. Mr. Fillmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is that the state, that Provo City and other cities in Utah are required as a function of state statute to provide certain opportunities for medical cannabis within our boundaries. My understanding, furthermore, is that the city has complied with that state statute to the minimum level. I've seen too many examples of people who, I've seen people who have really benefited from medical marijuana who swear by it. I also know people who manipulate the system to get it. If you break it into three components, as I understand the statute, there is the cultivation of marijuana, there is the distribution, and there is the production or refinement of the cannabis. And we have situated that in limited areas in the city. We're now being asked to open up in this particular spot, and not just a distribution capability, but a production capability. And I'm struggling in asking myself what value this brings to the city of Provo. There are ample locations in the county to secure medical cannabis. But as far as the production goes and the request to open up additional production possibilities, frankly, just speaking from an economic development perspective, this is an opportunity I would gladly relinquish to another city in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. Other comments? Mr. Harding.
I agree with the characterization given by Councilor Fillmore that the state set some minimum standards that we had to meet to comply, and we have done that. At this point, we are being asked to make a change that would make a part of our community more conducive for this activity. I'm curious. I guess we have a staff recommendation, and we have the planning commission recommendation. I'm curious if the administration has looked at this and where they, what they recommend to the council on this issue.
Mayor or Wayne, do you care to comment?
We're both kind of looking at each other like, well, how much do we know about this other than it's gone through the process? So Wayne, if you want to speak to it, does everybody know where it's located first? Where their business is? It's just on your way as you're exiting the freeway on Center Street and I-15. It's just in that little area right there. Okay, go ahead, Wayne.
It's on Draper Lane, if you know where that is, right at Center Street. I am. My light is on. Is that better? Okay. We'll figure this out one of these days. This facility is located on Draper Lane, so it's on the east side of the I-15 Center Street interchange. There's a number of other businesses, kind of a little industrial area over there. And as you heard during work session, there were some very specific state statutory requirements around medical cannabis dispensaries or pharmacies, however you want to call them. And so the question really kind of came down to if it's really a fully enclosed facility where, again, the operators aren't growing, so there's not lots of grow lights and lots of energy consumption and warehouses full of marijuana plants. But rather it's more of a packaging facility. So not unlike what's operated by New Skin down in the Mountain Vista Industrial Park, where they actually bring their nutraceutical raw materials in. They essentially divide them up, put them into gel caps and pop them in bottles, and then they're used as a pharmaceutical sort of product. So the facility would be very much like that. So it wouldn't be necessarily anything that you would be unusual in that area. It would look like a small manufacturing facility and would be adjacent to the pharmacy, the dispensary. So again, from our perspective, from a staff perspective, it seemed like a fairly low impact kind of thing. It supported a local business, which operates in that facility. And it's a use that we've had in other places. There was a proposal that we actually looked at, and I think it's been referenced earlier today, about a similar kind of facility in Mountain Vista. And our concern was, again, that Mountain Vista really has been all about substantial job creation. That's why we did Mountain Vista at the beginning. And this isn't a really big job generator. And so we sort of saw this as a reasonably good location, sort of out of the way. There's no residences around it. It's, it serves the needs of the adjoining retail establishment, for lack of a better term. And so again, I think the staff and the Planning Commission kind of saw it as a pretty low impact sort of issue. So I don't think we have a formal position on it other than that we're trying to reserve places at Mountain Vista for things that actually generated significant numbers of good paying jobs. And so we say no to a lot more things at Mountain Vista than we say yes to, just because of that sort of mission and vision for that industrial park. So happy to answer any further questions you might have.
Mr. Hoban.
Yes. No questions for Wayne. I'm just trying to think of the implications here. So right now, this business purchases it could purchase it from a zone in our city where it is allowed. I
Can you
guess.
speak up a little bit, Mr. Hoban? We're having trouble hearing you.
Let me take off my. Can you hear me any better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try that. Let me stop my video. So I guess I'm just thinking right now this business could probably just purchase this from somewhere else in the city, have it delivered, and then sell it. And so all we're doing is kind of eliminating maybe a drive of the product being driven a few miles or something like that. Is that correct, Wayne?
Well, Mr. Ardmore may know, I'm not aware of a facility in Provo that's doing this today. So my guess is, and again, the applicant may be able to shed some light on that, but my guess is it's being imported from another location and shipped in on, by truck or something, and then delivered in a final form in which a label could be put on and then sold at the local business. So this would shorten the supply chain, certainly save some money in terms of production. So that would be my guess. I don't want to speak for the applicant, but that would be my guess in terms of how that's likely to be played out.
Yeah.
Right. But theoretically, there could be a business in Provo at some point. So if we don't allow it here, they could get an office space or a warehouse space somewhere and do this somewhere else in the city where it is allowed, right? We have to allow it somewhere.
Yeah,
is my
Travis.
understanding.
Yeah, Travis, the issue is that under state law, we have to allow all three phases of the process within the city. What we've chosen to do at this time is to allow them in three different zones. So either some combination of three different companies or one company that owns property in three different zones would be required to have all three phases operate inside the city at the same time under current zoning. And so, both of the things that what the applicant is already doing is allowed everywhere in that zone. What they're proposing to do is already allowed everywhere in a different zone. And the proposal is that they could be allowed to do it only adjacent to their facility, only when in combination, the two of them are in combination together within the zone where they're currently at.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking through worst case scenario. I'll say worst case. I mean, you're just opening up where this could occur essentially. And so I think I'd have to understand more where right now it is allowed and what the difference is between those areas and this area. I'd almost prefer to drive it and maybe go and see the areas where it's currently allowed and the difference between those areas and the area we're considering before I think I'd be comfortable voting yes. I guess my default then, if we do want to move forward today, would be to vote no on it, or continue it so we get a little more information. So I guess that's where I'm at.
So I could shed a little light on that. If you could bring the map back up. The Freeway Industrial Zone is the only allowed zone for production right now, of which there are no current business licenses in Provo City for production. But it's essentially the north border of the city down to 820 North, and then in between I-15 to the east and the train tracks to the west. So that kind of that thin corridor between the tracks and the freeway and 820 North to the boundary, the north boundary of the city is the Freeway Industrial Zone. That's where production is currently allowed, but currently there isn't any business there doing that.
Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, I don't want to sound flippant, but I guess if I guess I don't understand quite what we're really working. That's acting legally and within their right to act, and they could create a production facility somewhere else, but it would be better for us to support them as an existing business adjacent to the existing location they already have. I'm sorry, but I'm not I'm not hearing a real concern. I'm hearing maybe some fear about the business that they're in potentially, as opposed to what we're actually talking about here, which is just a packaging facility next to a dispensary that already exists and is operating in our city. So I'm supportive of this, and I guess I'm waiting for the concern, the real concern beyond the industry that they're in.
Mr. Hanley?
I think I agree with Mr. Shipley. And I would add this is a conditional use, so it also seems like we're not opening a huge can of worms here. I think we're just making something a little more convenient for a business that we're not here to revisit the legislation on medical marijuana. So I don't see any danger to public safety in this. I think it's a pretty small ask and pretty straightforward.
Councilor Harding?
To answer Councilor Shipley, I would say that my concern is the industry. So I don't have concerns beyond the industry. I think it is the industry that I'm concerned about. I think the city was wise to take a minimally compliant position that we did, and now we're looking to make things more convenient or more attractive, and I'm not comfortable with that. And as far as conditional use, we have to define what those conditions are, or outside of that, as Mr. Pepperoni explained, basically we would have to prove that there's some unusual negative impact that could not be mitigated by any other way for a conditional use to be denied. So I don't think, we need to understand the very limited amount of added protection that a conditional permit or a conditional use gives us over a permitted use, particularly where we don't specify upfront what those conditions are. And the conditions that we've talked about here is it needs to be ancillary. So anyway, so hopefully that answers those questions.
Councilor Ellsworth?
I was just going to say I agree with Mr. Handley and Mr. Shipley.
Thank you. Well, I have mixed feelings on this. I kind of like the approach that the city's taken as well, where we've met the minimum requirements of state law. And lacking some knowledge on this subject, I'm just a little concerned about potential for spillover into other uses if we make things easier for this type of business. So that's kind of where I'm at. Any additional discussion on this item? If not, does any council member desire to consider this item again at the next council meeting? Mr. Shipley?
Yeah, I guess my comment is I would rather continue this than kill it. if we need more time to research what this actually is. So if the concern is that somehow we're endangering, or supporting an industry, supporting an industry that we don't like, or endangering citizens in some way, I'd rather we take a little bit more time and do some more research than kill the proposal today. I suppose we could bring it back up later, but it's less likely, obviously, if we kill it instead of continue it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess my thought is I'd rather continue it if somebody would like to support that than vote and kill it just because we haven't, potentially put some effort into researching this a little bit more.
Mr. Fillmore?
One of the concerns I have in response to Mr. Shipley's inquiry is not just the nature of the business, it's the precedent that a conditional use permit establishes. You grant one conditional use, you're going to find it difficult to deny others. Logically, Provo is known for a lot of things. I'm not eager for the county seat to be known as a magnet for cannabis production.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. And Mr. Shipley, should I interpret your comment as a request to consider this item again at the next meeting?
Yeah, I'm interpreting that this would fail 3-4 tonight. And so I would rather, if there was a chance that anybody would look into this more and research this over the next few weeks, I'd rather have that than for it to get killed tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hoban?
I was just going to make it easy for Dave and say, or Mr. Shipley, and say that, yeah, I'm not prepared to vote yes on it tonight. So if it goes to vote, I vote no. So I think your assessment of the 4-3 against is correct. So I am willing to do more research on this and come back. I'm not saying I need a continuation, but if Dave Shipley's asking for one, I will join him in that. I guess I'm Mr. Continue tonight, and I'll join him in that and do my research over the next couple weeks and come back with a more solid answer or more solid vote.
All right. It sounds like we have two supporting a continuation then. So that will conclude our discussion for tonight, and we'll revisit this one at our next meeting. Unless there's any objection, we will then adjourn by unanimous consent. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks, staff.
Night.